Welcome to Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton, and we have been going through the book in 6 days, Why 50 Scientists Choose to Believe in Creation. I've been working in the area of science research and science teaching for over 50 years now. And in fact, it would have been back in 1964 when I started work at the BHP Central Research Laboratories. And I remember my boss, my first boss, stood out from the other scientists there in that he was a Christian and very openly a Christian. And he was a really nice guy to work for. He loaned me the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, and he used to talk. This scientist used to talk to me about his faith in Jesus and answers to prayer. And I guess his life, the way he did his science, he was a meticulous scientist. He was precise in every detail. Everything had to be spot on. Our record keeping had to be spot on. We had to recall all the details, things that went wrong, exactly how things were. We had to record them. Our logbook pages were numbered, so a page couldn't be removed. There was a carbon copy kept of everything that we did as well in terms of recording our results. Later, he took up an academic position at the University of Melbourne, and I lost track of him for a while, but a couple of years ago now, I met up with him again, and mainly to tell him that I had become a Christian. And it was interesting that I learned that he too was a creationist. And one of the important points that he would point out to his students was, do you really believe that the amazing complexity that we see in nature around us could arise by chance? Now, of course, that's exactly the claim that people who believe in evolution and the theory of evolution as it's taught in the school claims, that all this amazing complexity that we see around us arose by chance. One of the main proponents of this, of course, has been the zoologist and leading evolutionist Dr. Richard Dawkins. And some time ago he wrote a book, The Blind Watchmaker. And of course this book received, glowing reports and reviews. The journal The Economist reported the book was a readable and vigorous defence of Darwinism, and promoted as possibly the best defence of Darwinism since 1859. Another review that was published in the Los Angeles Times when the book came out read along the lines, "Every page rings of truth. It is one of the best science books, one of the best of any books I've ever read," the reviewer wrote. The book was a winner of the Royal Society of Literature's Heinemann Prize. So again, this book was promoted as being this amazing book. And of course, essentially what the book was saying is that whereas creation, of course, claim there's design in nature, and hence like a watch with all its complicated parts has a watchmaker or a designer, Dawkins, of course, claims in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, that all this in actual fact can occur by chance. And he talks about how, if you take a simple phrase, after a while a monkey sitting at a typewriter could type the phrase. However, actually, if you look at the probability carefully, that it's only possible for the monkey to type the phrase if once it has the correct letter, that letter is then preserved. So there's got to be some mechanism that can somehow know that letter is the correct letter in the correct place. If the mechanism doesn't know that, the chances of the monkey typing a sentence that is meaningful is actually astronomically impossible. And so here we have a very subtle assumption that is being made that is not a valid assumption, because nature has no way of selecting or knowing that the right letter is in the right place, just as the monkey doesn't know that the right letter is in the right place at the right time. There would have to be some other external mechanism. And so these are the subtleties that are behind understanding the mathematics of the probability of life arising by chance. Now, in the book In 6 Days, there is a biologist in there, writes in there, a Dr. Timothy Standish, who holds his doctorate in biology and public policy from the University of Virginia. And he goes through and elaborately points out the major shortcomings in Dawkins' book, The Blind Watchmaker. And I think one of the reasons why we are doing this program on air is that there are a lot of assertions that are being made that evolution is true. It's a fact now. It underpins the science in our biology classes in school, and even programs on the ABC for children like Play School. You've got the dinosaur train and so forth, and learning about the Mesozoic period and the Cretaceous and so forth, these periods of time. Whereas when we look at the evidence from the Bible and the flood and the way the earth is structured, we know that these events must have occurred all at the same time. These global extinctions, global marine extinctions that the geological record tells us about, that are claimed to be hundreds of millions of years apart. In actual fact, we can see from the evidence they must have occurred at the same time and on top of one another. It just doesn't make sense otherwise, and we'll talk about that in more detail another time. But the point is that the long ages, the evolutionary theory, things occurring by chance, since things evolving over millions of years, is being inculcated into the minds of our young people. But when we actually look at the scientific evidence doesn't support the Darwin evolution scenario. And this is the point that Dr. Standish is making, points out. And one of the reasons that we've put this out in the book, for example, is so that people can actually read the evidence for themselves. That rather than just make assertions that, for example, that Dawkins is wrong, that evolution is wrong, we need the data, we need the facts. But those facts aren't getting through to the people. So that's why it's quite important to actually look at the data that is now out there. And again, for those listeners, if you simply Google creation.com or Creation Ministries International, and then when you get onto that website, if you do a search for In 6 Days, then all the chapters in this book will come up free on the website. And you can scroll down. So you could scroll down on the side of the page there, you'll see the name Dr. Timothy Standish, and you can look at his article there. Another important aspect, and again many people don't realise because we mainly work in the area of English literature and English scientists, but a very famous French mathematician, Marcel Paul Schutzenberger, who was a professor of mathematics in the Faculty of Science at the University of Paris from 1964 till his death in 1996. Prior to that, he'd worked at Massachusetts Institute of Technology from 1956 to 1957. He'd worked at Harvard from 1961 to 1962. he was a brilliant mathematician, and he actually showed back in the 1960s on the basis of mathematics, and his area was in the area of biological mathematics, the maths associated with statistics in biology, and so he was certainly an expert right in this area. He also worked in the maths behind the development of linguistics and languages, these sort of things. And he points out very, very strongly that it is mathematically impossible. It's the probability shows that evolution is absolutely impossible from the mathematics. And again, if you go into creation.com and do a search on the articles for, I guess it's hard to remember his name, Marcel Paul Schutzenberger, but if you Googled French Darwin data in the search engine on creation.com, or probably even if you Googled that, you would come up again with details about his opposition to Darwinism on the basis of mathematical science. Again, as we look at other scientists that have pointed out the major flaws in Darwinism in the area of genetics, another contributor to the book In 6 Days is Dr. James Allen. And he has his doctorate in genetics from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And he taught at university for years at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. And again, in his article, he points out when we look at the genetics and the genes, and of course, many proponents of evolution claim, well, you have gene duplication, and this allows for the evolution of such and so forth, and the similarity between the genes between apes and humans and so forth, and chimpanzees and humans, and therefore there must have been a common ancestor. He again deals expertly with these very issues and points out that the data, again, doesn't point to evolution. The data points to evolution not occurring. And it points out that if humans and chimps had evolved from a common ancestor, there are certain genetic changes that should have happened that haven't happened, and certain changes that have happened that are biomarkers of other events that should have happened that haven't happened. And it's quite a detailed scientific treatise, but he explains it in detail for those who are looking at the genetic side of things, why evolution is impossible. He also looks at the population studies and says that if we extrapolate on using the best population data that we have and extrapolate back, the Earth's population, as we have observed over the past hundreds of years, and we have a bit of an idea of population levels for several hundred years now, when we extrapolate back, we can see that life on Earth, only being, about 4,000 or 5,000 years old, or 4,000 or 5,000 years since the flood, actually fits the population dynamics really well. If it was much older than that, if it was, millions of years that humans were roaming on the Earth, then we would expect much different population dynamics to what we observe now. Another contributor, again, who rejects evolution and supports young Earth creation is a biochemist by the name of George Javel. And he earned his PhD in biochemistry from Columbia University in New York. Quite a prestigious university, of course, there, Columbia University. And his area of specialisation is actually in the area of E. coli bacteria. And in his chapter in the book, he points out very, very clearly and very strongly how it is absolutely impossible for a living molecule, a living organism, a living bacteria of some kind to form from non-living molecules. And one of the reasons for this is that he points out that the complexity of the simplest cell is absolutely enormous. So not only do we need the complex molecule of DNA, but we need hundreds of different types of nucleic acids. We need a whole lot of different types of fats. We need a whole lot of different types of sugar-type molecules. We need hundreds of little enzyme molecules. Now, these are special little protein-type molecules that catalyse chemical reactions or help chemical reactions that normally wouldn't happen. All these specialist molecules all have to be there, but not only just one or two of them. In the case of proteins and fats and sugars, we need millions of these molecules. And they're not just simple little sugars. They're not just little simple fats. These are long-chain polymer molecules, biopolymers. Now, I was reading an article just the other day in the newspaper where they were saying, scientists now believe they have more evidence that life first arose in some high-temperature thermal pool somewhere. But again, these claims go against what we know about chemistry at the present time, the chemistry of these molecules. Now, chemistry is a science, and we know there are laws of chemistry. The molecules obey certain laws of chemistry to react. Some things don't react. Other things do react. So in the presence of heat, petrol and oxygen will react, and we will get a flame. But you can heat glass in the presence of oxygen to a very high temperature, and it's not going to burn. So there are reactions that go, there are reactions that don't go. And so when we look at the biochemistry reaction, if we're going to form these long-chain biopolymers, millions and millions of them being required, and we're talking about tens of millions of them, of specialist molecules being required to actually form the structures of just one little living organism, then the chemistry to form these long-chain molecules says that these long-chain molecules are going to be less stable the higher the temperature, and also in the presence of water they're going to break down. They don't form. The long-chain molecules don't form in water, they break down in water. So we can see what the proponents are trying to push is the very opposite to what we observe when we study chemistry. And the complexity of all these reactions and the structures is just so complex that it's so hard for the human mind, the human brain, to actually perceive and get a picture of the enormous complexity that is in just the simplest little living cell that we wouldn't even be able to see with the human eye. But the other interesting thing is that, and George Javer points this out, Dr. Javer points this out, that even if we had all the components of the cell there, say we had the little living cell, well, not alive, but say we had all the structures there of all the sugars and the fats and the proteins and the nucleic acids and the enzymes, and they were all there. All the structure was there. It was already set up. Somehow it came together and formed. We still couldn't make it alive, because to make it alive, you would have to actually set into a state of disequilibrium, and that is out of balance, hundreds of biochemical reactions, all at the same time, all out of phase by just the right amount. And of course, this is impossible for it to happen, that they can be suddenly set up in a state of disequilibrium so that reaction A is out of is out of equilibrium with B, so that it's trying to force B to make it at just the right concentration for reaction with C to go, to be at just the right concentration for reaction D to go, and so forth down, and then back into the loop to produce just the right amount of material to produce in reaction A again. So it's extremely complex. I mean, it's hard to explain over the radio as well without diagrams and a blackboard, but these are the things that Dr. Jova points out very forcefully in his article as well. Another scientist who contributed, again, who points out why evolution is impossible in this book is a Dr. Duane Forde, and he holds his PhD in chemistry from the Clark University of Worcester in Massachusetts, and he'd been a professor of chemistry for many years, taught in the academic university system there in the United States for over 30 years. And again, he points out that if the Earth was made of pure carbon, it would contain only about 10 to the 50 carbon atoms, but more than 10 to the power 450 carbon atoms would be needed in order to make enough amino acids to form the proteins to achieve the probability of producing just one protein molecule with a prescribed sequence. So he goes on again, he does the calculations, he talks about the amazing evidence for intelligent design in nature, the blood clotting mechanism, the high degree of organisations in the cell. So again, you can see Dr. Duane Forde's article again, if you go on to creation.com, Google creation.com, do a search in the search engine there for In 6 Days and look up the chapters. But what about faith? There are many leading scientists who recognise that God is real. Was in one of his books, Dr. Ben Carson, the famous neurosurgeon, talks about how he was doing this brain operation on this child, and suddenly from deep within the brain there was massive hemorrhaging. Blood was pouring out everywhere. They couldn't see where the blood was coming from. So much blood was coming out. It was so deep. They put suction on. They just couldn't keep up with it. They realised that at this rate of blood loss, they would lose the child. And so here we have this world-leading brain surgeon trying to save the life of this child. And he talks about how he just prayed, Lord, please stop the bleeding. We can't do anything. I can't do anything. Please stop the bleeding. And he just jabbed the special forceps down further into the brain, and the bleeding stopped. And they were able to save the life of the child. And he talks about these many answers to prayer that is real. And I think for many people think that God is is this amazing creator. If he existed, is really not interested in them. But I don't believe that is true. We have many personal experiences with God, or I have. I mean, just yesterday, my colleague that I work with had spent several weeks preparing a special presentation that he had to give later this week. And he said to me, John, I can't find my presentation. It's not on my computer. I can't find where I've saved it. And when you open PowerPoint on the computer, all the recent files come up, and it wasn't coming up as a file that he had opened recently. He said it's not there. It's not coming up that I've opened it up recently, and I can't find it in any of the places, any of my folders where I've saved it. And he was really panicking because he said, I don't have time now to do my presentation. To re-prepare it again. It's taken me ages. And I just sensed his panic, and I said to him, we need to pray. and I prayed, God, if the file is on the computer, please help us to find it. And we just opened our eyes, and where he'd been scrolling down, that a name for that file came up, but it had a $sign in front of it, and the file was empty, but at least now he had the name. And he said, where did that come from? Where did that file name come from? Where is it? Where is it on my computer? And because he'd already done searches, entering in and searching through the computer to try and find the file name. And I was impressed to say, look, scroll down and look in this particular area. And we scrolled down, and then sure enough, there was the file. It was stored in a totally unrelated file, a file related to nothing to do with what he would normally do with work. And somehow it had been stored there, and as I said, it wasn't coming up under the search engines. But he gave me a hug after that, because that was so meaningful to him. I was just on the phone this week to another friend who's a professional prospector, and he was saying he was just a couple of weeks ago had spent 10 days looking for these very old gold workings. They're on this massive cattle station in very rugged area west of Townsville, northwest of Townsville in the mountains there. Several 100,000 acre property, and they'd been out for 9 or so days, and they'd begun to get some nuggets. But the track that they were on was extremely rough. They'd gone through a lot of fuel, and they thought there's a shortcut where we can get back onto the highway. And they realised, though, that the track they thought they were on was so rough, and it wasn't then taking them back to where they could get onto a road, and they realised they'd passed the point of no return, and they were running out of diesel. They didn't have enough diesel to get back, and my friend said, I prayed, Lord, we need diesel. Somehow you've got to provide us with some diesel out here. And they turned around, and they're coming back, and they're through the bush. They noticed way over in the distance a derelict machine, and they went over to it, and there was this rusting away old abandoned bulldozer, but there was still a little bit of diesel in the fuel tank, and they were able to drain about a bucketful out, which gave them enough fuel to get back to the farmer's homestead where they could get fuel. So these are the examples that show to me in just everyday life that God is real. This has been Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Bye for now.
You've been listening to a production of 3ABN Australia Radio.